Excellent. Gareth is so onto it. Kia ora, everyone, and welcome to our final session of our pre-Huis. We've had some real interesting, great presentations over the last 4 days. Hopefully, that doesn't mean that being a tail-ender batsman that I'm not a batsman, but the subject I guess we're going to talk about today is around. It follows the theme around what are the things that we could do together as a combined group of networks. And so we've taken a little bit of a different spin at this, and we're looking at something like a local or regional sort of approach to where members of our networks have come together under a single kaupapa and just found a natural fit, and where there's energy in a region being able to do some things without and being able to do some things and do them really well. And so we've got some of the people that are on that group, I'll introduce them. And Carla G will join us shortly. She's from Eco Matters. We've got Daniel from Beautification Trust. Apologies from Michael from Waiheke Resources Trust. Janet Coles with Kaipatiki. So we've got some, and and we've also got Waiuku Zero Waste, who's part of that movement. And it's one of the neat things about this movement is around, we're looking at climate change and how you bring that message closer to the community, how you bring them close to our people. And so it was driven by Auckland Council in terms of they saw a need and a gap in terms of the services that they were providing that were great at developing stuff like Free to Live Lightly Forum. But how do you really connect with community? And I think that's probably a big question that's asked nationally. So I'm going to put up a slide to get us started on this conversation. This is where I get to really test my skills and share my screen. Just going to put that up now. Thank you. Hopefully you can see that. And what I will do is as members of the Auckland Regional Climate Action Network pop on, look, please feel free to jump in and do this unscripted presentation with me. So I'll do my best to follow this anyway. Yeah, so there was what we've known up here in Auckland, for example, is we've known that while policymakers and local boards and councils and other experts can develop a whole lot of messaging around reducing carbon emissions, that we should be doing this and we should be doing that, one of the biggest challenges has always been how do you communicate that to your local community at a level that they can understand. And so they put out a pānui for some of us to come together and start to look at how that could happen. And what was really neat is that the people they reached out to were people from our networks. You've got IHA represented there and Zero Waste, and so there was a natural drawing together of strengths of passion around that area. And one of the things that's been really difficult to probably explain in the past was that things like zero waste is climate action, or the work that we do in the environment is climate action, whether it's getting more people into public transport or using bikes or cleaning the environment. All this stuff is it contributes to it, but it was never clear for people of what does that actually mean for me as a householder. Was it enough for me to do away with single-use plastic bags? Was it enough for me to change the way I reduce my rubbish and start doing home composting? And I don't think that message had gotten to a point where people could really embrace it, especially when you look at the challenges that there are out there for people. The cost of living has always been at the forefront of people's minds. there's a recognition by Auckland Council that our networks have a good history and a successful history of reaching out to our communities and taking these messages out to them. But also around that, it's also then recognizing that with that comes a need for it to be resourced. It just doesn't, we can't keep doing these things because it's out of the goodness of our services that we provide. It needs to be resourced and resourced well, and that way gets coordinated. And so one of the things that we felt was that it'd be useful to bring it to this forum, because it is an example of how our networks can work together in a regional cause and start to drive information back to our national network, and looking at ways we could possibly leverage from our strength as a bigger Aotearoa network. So that's probably one of the key considerations for us, because there's a limit to what councils can do. And with the forming of this network, we recognise that the funding there is limited. So a lot of this drive will be handed over to this climate action network to push forward and develop. Now, I'm just going to check to see who's come onto the call at the moment. I think I saw our mate Te Reko Matters join.
Kia ora, Say.
Hey, right. So, kia ora, Carla. So that's just a little bit of background of how we've come together, I guess, and how this sort of intertwines with the kaupapa and the thinking around this week. And so that I don't take any kudos for these amazing slides, I'm going to pass you over to Carla to continue from our first slide and onwards. Kia ora, Carla, welcome.
Kia ora, Say. Kia ora i te whānau. Lovely to see you all. And thank you for the great introduction, Say, to CCAN and to this movement that we're trying to get underway in Tamaki Makaurau. Say, can I get you to move on to the next slide, Hannah, if you have control or access, or you can do that for me?
Well, let me see if I can do that. There we go.
Awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Han. So Say has mentioned a little bit of this already, guys, in terms of sort of who are we, who is the Community Climate Action Network here in Tamaki Makaurau. And we are a network of different organisations that have actually come together. So we've got national conservation organisations involved, like Forest and Bird. We've got national networks representing the waste sector, which of course is the Zero Waste Network that are involved. We've got environmental community-based eco-hubs, so the 4 EHA members are very actively involved in CCAN here in Tamaki Makaurau. That's Beautification Trust, Eco Matters, Kaipariki Project, and the Waiheke Resources Trust. And we're standing alongside advocacy groups. So we've got organisations like Bike Auckland involved, and we've got some wonderful, really grassroots organisations that are working really closely with some of our ethnic communities, and we recognise the absolute importance of that, given the diversity of cultural communities that make up Tamaki Makaurau. So that includes organisations like the Chinese Conservation Trust and like SAG, which particularly are looking at working with South Asian communities, and they do encompass quite a few. What brings us together as a network, a deep desire to turbocharge our climate action in our city is the overwhelming reason that we're all there. And I do just want to touch very briefly on Say's comment about funding from Auckland Council for this network. So just so that you guys have got some clarity and we're transparent about that. So Auckland Council's Community Climate Action Team, or Community Climate, what's the actual name, Say? It's changed so many times that I'm not even sure what their title now is for that team of Auckland Council. But basically they did fund the first 4 meetings that we attended. So to come along to these meetings. But from there on, we've been donating our time at this stage. So just moving on to the next slide.
Does that change for you? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that's perfect, honey. That's perfect. So how did we actually get started? So CCAN grew out of an event that Auckland councils, and I've put the environmental services team, that's what they were called back when we actually started this in October 2022. And they put out a far-reaching invitation for community organisations, community groups, other existing networks to come together and just discuss climate action being undertaken at grassroots level within our community, within Tamaki Makaurau. And that meeting, there were an absolute heap of different organisations actually turned up to that meeting, from people that turned up that were just actually doing their own thing within their community, hyper-local little organisations, right the way through to national networks that actually turned up on that day. And it was a really awesome, high-energy day spent together, exploring and talking about climate action happening across Tamaki Makaurau. And out of that really big kind of event came these 9 groups that have gone on to actually start and form this network. So it was those of us, I guess, that could see a vision of what this network might be able to provide for Tamaki Makaurau and all of the smaller organisations or networks actually already operating. We kind of stuck together. So the 9 of us have stuck together, representing our organisations and turning up to these meetings every month to actually talk about what our mahi might look like and what we as a network might be able to offer. So we do have a plan to work with, because Tamaki Makaurau has Auckland Climate Plan. And so we refer to that loosely as our Bible. It's a difficult read. It's not an easy read, and it is a big document, and there's a lot in it, and parts of it are quite dry and boring. So we see one of the possibilities of the network is to play a role in terms of translating that language out of the climate action plan into something that our communities and our groups can actually use, that our community groups can use and can identify with. Thank you, Say. Next slide. So what's next? Now, I'm sorry, guys, there are some bits missing in here, and I'm really hoping that Janet or Daniel are actually on this meeting as well, because yesterday we actually went into a strategic planning session for the network, really expertly led by Annette Lees, with the intent to actually develop and design our vision and set 3 strategic work plans for the network. Now, I unfortunately had to leave that meeting halfway through the day, so that I know what 2 of them were. So the first one was really around how we would offer support to our members, and the second one was around advocacy and influence. But I'm hoping at this stage, Janet.
Yep, the third one, Carla, was connectivity. So
connectivity and collaboration. Yep.
Group together, and our support to members was around a strategic overview.
Fantastic. Thank you, Robin. Thank you so much. I'm delighted you're on. Yeah, so that was a really fantastic session. And I think one of the things that Annette did so well for us as a group is she kept reminding us to take off our individual organisations' hats. So, you know, don't speak from the perspective of Eco Matters or Kaiparaki Project, but talk from the intent of this network. Like, what are we doing in this network? What are we trying to achieve? And she did a fantastic job of it. So I'm really excited to see the plan that comes out from that session, and we will very gladly share that with everybody so that you can see. The other couple of things that are happening to the sideline, we have created a dedicated email for the network, and that's simply because we want to reach out to smaller organisations, different groups all across the city, and really welcome them to come into the network or to join the network. And that may be for a period, or that may be for, you know, a long time, who knows, but we want to just really extend that welcome to everybody. And we are underway with designing and developing a brand for CCAN, so an actual visible brand that we can actually use representing CCAN as a network. So that's kind of where we've gotten so far, guys. And yeah, I'm going to hand back to you, Say, or I'm certainly going to hand over to Robin. Or Daniel, if there's other things that you might like to add, or anything I've missed, given that I missed the second part of yesterday.
Sure. Yeah, I can just add a little bit more from in the afternoon. We did also talk about having a online presence as well. So Live Lightly is an existing website that Auckland Council run, so there might be a bit more of a presence on that website, or we might develop our own site to act as a platform for the different organisations that are a part of this network as well, was something that we discussed, and also a little bit more around there might be some support in terms of securing funding as well for each of the different organisations that are a part of it, was the other thing I think that was touched on in the afternoon.
We also mentioned, talked about the possibility of being able to work together around trying to advocate for policy change and doing it, you know, joint submissions, things like that, helping and supporting groups to be able to be involved in that as well.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, because one of the big things for Auckland Council is they do have their long-term plan coming up, and this is quite well timed with when we're going to launch this more formally, with having some support for local groups to be able to really advocate strongly for real strong climate action within the long-term plan.
Yeah, awesome. Fantastic. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Robin, so much for sharing that. One of the first actions, guys, that I think is an interesting thing to share with you all, that came out of yesterday, was the possibility of us actually running a campaign, so a joint campaign over all of the organisations that are involved within CCAN, with a very simple message. But we really took heart from Climate Shift. And for those of you guys who might have seen that piece of work coming out from Forest and Bird and Greenpeace, which was, you know, the message to all of our political parties around what we wanted to see included in their policies from a climate action perspective and an environmental perspective. And for any of you that actually saw Climate Shift or joined that as a campaign, they did an amazing job at just making that so easy to share and so easy to feel connected to as an organisation, and feel connected to and believe in, to be able to actually join that movement. So for us, we're very much looking at, can we sort of activate a similar type campaign across Tamaki Makaurau, and given that transport is our largest carbon emissions here in Auckland, it sort of stands to reason that that might be where we head in the first instance. But those are some of the ideas and thoughts that are percolating for a way that everybody can actually really lend into that and support it and spread it far and wide, those simple messaging across Auckland.
Yeah, that's great. I think one of the other things that I think that's really neat here is that we've got different strengths and we have access to different sorts, to different parts of our community, which is really neat, because when you look at the sort of regional approach, it'll be different for different parts of the country. But for Tamaki Makaurau, we look at, we had the storm of our anniversary day storms and the flooding that happened there. In some ways, what that storm did was it brought to the attention that climate change is flooding our houses in Auckland already, and that sort of woken people up a little bit to take notice of something that was happening over in Nauru or the Kiribati or somewhere else. It's not happening here with us, so it's starting to connect the dots around reducing carbon emissions to even dealing with a climate change event that happens, like we did, and what are the roles that we can all play. So, I think when Gareth presented on the energy topic, I think when we're thinking about the things that sort of go when an event happens, it's often either water or energy, communications, they all disappear. And how do you build that resiliency? And there's, we've got centres, whether it's a part of our Eco Hub centres or it's a Zero Waste Network centres, that are in position to be able to respond in different ways. So, it's not just through education, but it's through the infrastructures that we have and the sites that we have. We offer different opportunities to be able to not just provide education, but then to respond in the different ways that we're able to, whether it's in the provision of stuff for people who are without a home, or whether it's whether we've all got solar panels and batteries and that fancy internet thing that never goes down. It's those sorts of opportunities that sort of help to continue to embed us in our communities. So when things get a bit shaky, hopefully our communities are also there for us to say, actually, no, beautification, eco matters, etc. They're all important parts of our community. They play a part in not just education, but giving our people a sense of calm and hope in that space. Yeah, that's probably it for me for now. I don't know if there's any questions in there.
Yeah, there's a statement there from Helen that Helen, would you be willing to talk about your comment in there around the workshop?
Sure. So I attended a training earlier in the year, which was absolutely fantastic, by an organisation called The Workshop. And I'm a comms person. That's what I do as part of my organisation, as well as a big pile of other stuff. So I'm very interested in language and how that can engage and inform change as well. And they do something called Narratives for Change, which is around how you can use language to engage people and, encourage change and, cohesive action. But they do a very specific set of training around climate language. And I learned so much, because I think some of the language that we use can actually disengage people, because it's such a big problem that people go, oh, and they throw their hands up in the air, which is exactly the opposite of what we want. And so just linking to what you said around, obviously, the things that have recently happened around the country, just very simple things that this workshop taught me was to not necessarily talk about climate change, which is quite nebulous, but talk about things like climate disruption, because we now all know what that is. We are disrupted by what's going on here. So it's little gems like that really engage people. Highly worth doing. They do occasionally subsidize their training as well, but I can't recommend it enough. I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed the people I met there as well.
Thank you, Helen. That's such a great recommendation. Really, really appreciate it. And for anybody looking, the link is in the chat. So thank you. Just great.
I was going to ask a question. It was pretty much on that. Of the group, like you've been beavering away for just over a year now on this, and there must have been moments where there's sort of feeling somewhat overwhelmed with the scale of the problem, and sort of, I guess, you sort of funnel back down to what you can do and just really focus. And I was just wondering, like, is there a process there? Like, how churny was that in terms of people feeling daunted while you were having these meetings?
That's a really good question, G. Because I personally didn't feel like that when we were meeting. And I wonder if that's because very early on, we had really actively identified and stated that we couldn't possibly do everything. So we were going to focus on some of the key areas first. So right from the beginning, we were kind of like, our focus is going to be in transportation, food and energy for Tamaki Makaurau. Those are the important top three. Now, that's not to say all of the other work that's going on that our community groups are doing in restoration and conservation and, pest-free movement, all of that are not as important. They all obviously need to keep going. But we managed the overwhelm, I think, by really sort of narrowing our expectations around what we wanted to focus on, and then setting in place a plan around, we might take transportation first, or we might take, whatever it is that we decide as a network. And I think that did enable us to stay quite focused and stop that feeling of total overwhelm of, as Helen so rightly said, a problem that seems so big. But I'm saying that from a very personal perspective. I would like, Robin, it'd be lovely to hear your thoughts, or Daniel, your thoughts on that.
Well, certainly I came into it a little bit later. I worked for Kaipatiki Project, and Janet Cole has been involved all the way through, and she brought me in a little more recently. And I think you're absolutely right, Carla. The focus has been the most important thing. We have Auckland Council organised a hui, and there were a number of other groups just a couple of months ago who came along, and we talked to them. We ran a little activity around what people were expecting, and literally every idea that anybody's ever had that matters around climate action was mentioned. But I think for us, coming back to the main areas has really helped. It also helps that everybody there is so passionate and so involved anyway, that it helps, like, we're used to being overwhelmed. It's normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd agree with what Robin and Carla have said too. Yeah, that really streamlined focus on a couple of areas has been really important to us, and I guess for me personally as well. I think there's a lot of power in the coming together, and that's actually quite energizing rather than depressing, in the sense of that you're all in this together and you're working in partnership. And I did come away from a lot of those meetings feeling more energized than less, knowing that actually it's not just about one organization doing it. It's the power of the network, all being able to work really collaboratively and together and share those resources as well.
Yeah, really good point.
And just finally to add to that, one of the lessons I learned very early in my zero waste network journey was someone once said to me, when you get into this space, just get some mates, get to know people and make some friends, and it becomes a lot less lonely. And I think one of the I guess it's the characteristics of our free networks is it's not I don't think none of it is ego driven. It's purpose driven. And we get a lot of we get energized when for example, when Zero Waste Network members get together and we have our hui, we get totally energized from that. In some ways, this regional approach gets us energized. It sort of replaces the 12 months that it takes before we all get together as a network. So that's just some of the I think really important parts that make this work, is because we are driven by a common kaupapa. We're not out there contesting for the same putia, which often systems put us in, but we're in there to try and get the best outcome, get the best resources for this common kaupapa. It's probably what I can contribute there, Gareth.
Yeah. So, there's a question there from Liana about how, and I think this might be one that we end up answering at the hui rather than necessarily today, but if someone's got an idea, how we could help harvest what you guys have done and are doing, and sort of, I'm loath to say template it because I don't think that's necessarily the best approach, but how do we get these across the country? And just maybe as a first crack at answering that, Karen, I'm just wondering, you said you put a link to what's happening in Nelson. Did you want to just quickly talk about what's happening there, and we just see if there's some overlaps and how that's been done?
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. We've set up the Nelson Tasman Climate Forum. I don't claim any credit for doing so, but I'm quite heavily involved, sort of representing zero waste, obviously. It's been painful. We do have regular funding from Nelson City Council now, and possibly from Tasman District Council. It's not a network as such. It would be great if it was a network. So it's one organisation that isn't actually a formal organisation at the moment. We hang off the coattails of Tasman Environmental Trust, which is another awesome organisation. But we've just launched a behaviour change programme called The Jump, which has come from the UK, and it's all about focusing on sort of like 7 key areas. That I'll put a link to the website on the chat. But yeah, I think it's really important to keep involved with what's happening around the country and share good stuff, and know that we're not all alone. I mean, obviously I'm a huge fan of networks, surprisingly. Yeah, it'd be good to see how. I'm not saying that ours is perfect, but it's something that we've got here, and it's amazing. I've met so many new people through it from all walks of life, some amazing people, which is great. I thought I knew everybody in this sector around Nelson, but I've learned a lot as well. So we're big into doing submissions and how we get submissions approved by the members of the organisation is a big thing, of consensus and stuff like that. That's often quite difficult to and time consuming, and stuff like that I think we've nailed. So yeah, I'm happy to talk to anybody about that when at the Hui. I'll be there.
Sounds like there's a bit of overlap and I think it was you, Robin, talking about doing some collective submission work as well. Rather than templates, it's probably nuggets, say some core behaviours or ways of being as a group that are important features, and maybe picking on Auckland Council and 1 or 2 others that are helping to take a lead and suggesting that they need to champion that through their networks as well. There's a message there from George that we should be lining Simon up here for what's happening in the Waikato. Simon, can you talk to that a little bit, even though you haven't volunteered?
Hi there, everyone. Sorry, I was just catching up on the chat there.
Just a comment there from George saying, that your region, our region, is doing some good work in this space as well, instead of calling in some groups.
I know here at GoEco we've been doing a climate response program. That's been working with small businesses and charities to handhold them through the emissions mapping process, and just starting those conversations about how can we sort of get a feel for our emissions, and what sort of things can we do to start to look at mitigating and dealing with those. So that's one program that we've been dealing with here. Yeah.
And that was in partnership with Parakori as well, with Jackie.
And Parakori, So.
And I think that had the district council involved. Did they sort of seed fund that, help set it up?
A little bit from, I think, district and city council, and Yep. So that's great. So we had about 21 organisations in the end there. Yeah. So there's some good changes and responses coming out of that. There's some great stories too. And those are the really neat things to share. People, it generates ideas and thoughts, and it's really cool. So we're working on the report for that. So
What's the timing on that report, Sam?
Probably there's been a few little hold-ups here at this end, but well, a couple of months or before then probably, but it started in with the funding. So
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Gareth. Look, I see Therese Mangoes is on call, and I know Pacific Vision Aotearoa have been doing a lot of work with demobilising the Pacific community here in Tamaki Makaurau, and they've had things like climate change expos, bringing in the community. And I wondered if Therese, if you're there, if you'd like to speak on that, because I think it's amazing stuff you guys are doing. You're doing there. Kia ora ana, Therese.
Kia ora ana. I'm in the local Te Manawa Library in Westgate. So
Nice.
I'll try and talk quietly. But yeah, it's been lovely connecting in with you all and hearing the great work that's been happening. And when I'm hearing it, it's a completely different language to what we've been immersing ourselves in the last 4 months. And the reason why we're immersing ourselves, not only because it needs to be done, is because we weren't part of the climate action plan for Auckland. So Pacific and disabilities were missed out. So this is work that we're doing now to kind of redress that and give voice to our people. And so, it's a really well, I can't even describe the word. It's fascinating just being alongside our people and understanding the hundreds of different points of view from our different island nations. You think of one island nation, you're talking about a collection of islands, and on those islands there's all the villages. So it's right down to a village level. Everyone's coming together for their own different reasons. So we're just trying to understand and navigate how we can move forward and communicate. So alongside our work, our first port of call was to create a communication strategy, really, because it's all about the languaging, as I'm hearing you all talk about. So what is climate action? For us, it's completely different. When we won't be talking emissions, it'll be about our wā, our relationships, our mauri, and so we'll be following Māori. They're our tuakana teina. So all of that. We're at the beginning of that journey. We're all doing climate action. Just breathing the air that we breathe is climate action. So I'm really loving hearing it from both the young people and the older people kind of perspective. From a whaifakau, a pastor, to a young, just out of school, all fired up person. So we're creating what we call manawa, which is a kind of circle of leaders that people can participate in to have these conversations. So lovely to get the call out there, putting me on the spot. And we'll keep connected, and I will be coming down to Otepoti for the hui. So I'll look forward to seeing some of you there.
Awesome.
That sounds super cool. Keen to hear more about that. Just putting a note out there. I think it's on the Monday. It's on the day where our individual networks do their thing. But we're going to have a session after lunch where we're doing that regional collaboration. We had a first crack at that last year in my hood. So we're going to do that again. And so maybe some of what we're talking about today, if you're seeing someone talking about some work in your region, that's a good time to start having a chinwag about it. But today's your bit sounded like it's relevant in more than one region. So maybe we need to have another conversation about how we get that cranked up a bit. From an energy hardship point of view, Pacifica are 5 times more likely to be an energy hardship than Pākehā, and Māori are 4 times. So actually the Pacifica group it's one of the it doesn't have any program that's lined up specifically for Pacifica. So there's a need for that voice.
Yeah.
Cool. Was there anybody else that had a question or wanted to talk or say something? Just going through, there's a bit more there from Karen, a few more links. What's going on? Some more rubbish about zero waste by the looks of it. All right. I think we're there. Say, was there anything more from the Auckland crew there that you wanted to leave us with? Any final statements? What's next? What's happening next? What's going to be lined up this summer?
No, I think we'll get together down in Otepoti and have a good chinwag there. Lots of really cool, inspiring people around. So I just see, yeah. So and probably nothing more from our team. Yeah, I guess for us now, I think George, Gareth, this is our last session before we all meet up. Yeah, if there's any notices you want to give, but I just want to thank everybody for making the time this week. It's a busy, crazy, nutty time of the year for everybody, but the fact that you've invested in this means that we can have some really good conversations in a couple of weeks' time. I know there's been some flight bumps and things like that, and hopefully that gets all resolved for you. We're here if you've got any questions. We're still working through some of the details, and we'll be connecting with our different members around, just making sure that you've got the information that you need. So, yeah, Gareth, anything more on that? Or
no. So we are pulling together little summaries of each of these sessions, and we have recorded them all, more or less, most of all of them. So those summaries and these recordings will be made available next week. So if there's anything you wanted to check up on, but just a heads up, I guess, that these 5 sessions plus a discussion from the joint boards, all 3 boards are going to be meeting on the Sunday afternoon to talk about this and sort of debrief what's happened in the last year and how we want to roll for the next year or 2. So we're using these discussions as part of that, and we'll definitely be using the discussions on Tuesday to lead that. So it's a pretty flat structure, as you guys all know. So feel free to fire through any thoughts that you've got to any one of us in the short term, but also, I guess, just come pre-armed with any thoughts that you've had from this week for that Tuesday.
Kia ora. I'll finish us off by with our karakia, and yeah, you guys have a great weekend. So unuhia ke te urutapu kia wātea, kia mama, te ngākau, te tinana, te wairua I te ara takata, koia rā e rongo, whakairia ake ki runga, kia tina, haumi e, hui e, taiki e.
Yeah, taiki e.
Kia ora, everybody. Have a great weekend. See you soon.
Kia ora, Say. Ka kite, everybody.